Welcome to this update of a well-received old series, Jesus Said What? It was originally a longer sermon series that became a Right Now Media program and now is being reproduced for podcast, Gospel Rant, YouTube, Dr. Bill Sinyard, and weekend conferences. You can get a workbook that will be helpful to you from Amazon. So why is another series on the Sermon on the Mount valuable to Christians, right? You know, the real folk who have to struggle in this beat up, me first, real world. I mean, certainly we've heard of the Beatitudes hundreds of times before. So why spend another couple hours on this, beat up old worn topic? Well, here's one reason, right off the bat. Most of us have been taught that the Beatitudes were moral instructions for the religiously devout to earn God's favor. Kind of like a Jesus TED's talk. So instead, though, its goal is very different. Jesus was speaking to an unworthy, perennially sinful, marginalized, shamed, spiritually destitute. They were people deemed unworthy by religious society. And Jesus declared that the kingdom of heaven belongs to them, right there. It's yours, he says. And that's a mic drop moment that's too often missed because, honestly, it raises lots of questions. I mean, is that what you expected him to say to that group? It is really good news, but we need to unpack it and process it some, right? So welcome to my YouTube channel, Dr. Bill Sinyard. Hey, if you benefit from this series, like it, subscribe, leave a comment, pass it on. By the way, we love comments, questions. It helps us get this out to more people, causes the program to grow, so thanks ahead of time. Matthew 5:3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The idiom poor in spirit doesn't refer to humble spiritual seekers or voluntary poverty, give it all up for the kingdom. Rather, it refers to deeply broken individuals, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, stuck in a hole with no way out. Jesus doesn't offer these people how to do it, moral lessons, spiritual checklist. Instead, he brings a rescue, compassion, healing without conditions or judgment. He sees them, moves towards them, he touches them as they are. Matthew 4:23. Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. News about him spread all over Syria, and people brought to him all who were ill with various diseases, those suffering severe pain, the demon-possessed, those having seizures, and the paralyzed, and he healed them. Large crowds from Galilee, the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and the region across the Jordan followed him. I want to highlight Matthew's narrative hyperboles in that section. I'm going to say more in a moment. Far too often we've imagined that this was an all-Jewish crowd, right? Did you think that? Something like you might see at a synagogue or at the temple in Jerusalem. Good Jews who just want to get it right, want to get better, want to get closer to Yahweh. So the phrase among the people, it's generic, laos. Context has to determine whether it was Jewish, non-Jewish, or mixed. And honestly, there's little in the context to suggest that this was a totally Jewish or even a majority Jewish crowd. The northern Galilee region was sliced by the Way of the Sea, the Via Maris. It's a very important Roman trading road that linked the Far East, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, China, with Rome and further west. The towns on the northern side of Galilee, including Capernaum, were becoming very multicultural. Think massive caravans supporting organizations, bureaucracies to deal with shipping, taxing, guarding, entertainment. The hillside was most likely littered with a lot of very diverse people coming to see a show, perhaps. Matthew tells us that so many were just broken. They were diseased, right? No cure, no respite, only a life of pain and isolation and shame. Rumors that God's cursing some secret sin in their lives. And like I said in the last talk, no doubt fear, anxiety, depression, maybe anger, but definitely subconscious longing for a father embrace. Disease, 424, nosos. It's a physical malady of some kind, illness. In Mediterranean honor shame society, it devalued a person. Sickness, verse 23, which is bodily weakness, debility, often linked with demon possession. So imagine the physical, mental, emotional headspace those poor people were in, and some for their entire lives. These were the ones that Jesus gathered to start his worldwide movement. Think of a spectrum 0 to 10. 0 is where they feel like they don't have anyone there for them. They don't feel worthy of the love of God or their family or tribe or others. They don't feel that they can count on anyone other than themselves. 10, the opposite. It's a bell-shaped population curve, no doubt, but where would you put it? The center of the curve, would you put it at an 8 or a 2 or right in the middle at 5? And also, notice Matthew's extravagant use of adjectives, whole, every, and all, in verses 24 to 25. He's painting an exaggerated picture, creating a sense of comprehensiveness, totality. Jesus is bigger than life. Something huge is happening. Why? I guess it's to portray Jesus as the most significant person ever. Bigger than any doctor, philosopher, rabbi, politician, general, Caesar, any other messianic figure. Jesus is a unique world changer with great unheard of before powers. And here, in stunning contrast, he is invested in the most unlikely people that no one else seems to care about. It's the way the society is bent. Great history telling by Matthew, and Matthew does it better than anyone. So why do these shamed people come? Often shamed people avoid crowds. If I was to speculate, my guess is that for most of them, they came out of desperation to get some relief from their pain, their isolation, loneliness, shame, and they were willing to go anywhere and try anything, even an audience with a Jewish rabbi. They just needed to be rescued. Jesus, they heard, had some powers. All right, let's go. I don't care if he's a good Jew or a bad Jew or Jerusalem or Galilee. I don't care. I want relief, and I'm willing to risk failure, being mocked, laughed at, associated with other outies if I have a chance of some healing. And if this doesn't work, I don't know what to do next. Poor in spirit. I want to say some things about poor in spirit. It's an idiom, tokoi to pneumati. And we know what idioms are. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. That's not an instruction on the care of horse dentistry, right? We also have religious idioms. Fall from grace, lean into Jesus, baptism by fire, get religion. It's more than just what the phrase says literally. So poor in spirit likely doesn't mean they are spirit light. Here's commentator Bruner. Tokoi comes from the verb toso, to cower, to cringe. It means the abject poor, the abysmally impoverished, those completely dependent upon others to make it, probably the much maligned welfare poor, the undone, pathetic, miserable. Tokos was the strongest word for poverty available to Matthew. They are the marginated people, the city's underclass, the worldwide wretched of the earth, those who have reached the bottom spiritually, emotionally, and psychically too, who cannot live without God's supernatural help and miraculous intervention, close quotes. Some misunderstand that what tokoi in spirit refers to as a spiritual lacking of some kind, or these were the ones who were finally ready to receive, or those who had made the humble choice of selling all their wealth to become financially poor for the sake of Yahweh or Jesus. And all of those things may have some truth, but they miss the dark societal and individual depth of the phrase. It's better to see tokoi in spirit as an idiom referring to the person who is emotionally, spiritually, relationally stuck in a deep, deep hole, no way out. Right? We should be able to relate to that, right? All they have is a shovel. They're broken, and they can't or won't fix themselves. It's likely that it's not all their fault. If religious, they would have thought that they were cursed by God, or their God, whatever God that might have been. They may not even feel the lack or the brokenness, the lack of spirituality, maybe subconsciously. So many hurt people are in a depressed state or have emotionally dysregulated or are in the midst of self-medicating the pain. And there's denial, meaning they may not be very aware of much that's happening in their brain. They're just sad. And that's the point. This is not about their actions or lack of actions. These people are stuck in deep crevices, partly of their own making, and the more they dig, the deeper it goes. They just won't benefit from trying harder. So to propose that Jesus is teaching new principles for them to try, it's ridiculous and insensitive. They don't need a guidebook. They need a rescue. Often, chronically beat up people stop looking to God as well. God hadn't been a friend to them, so why would they want anything to do with him? No judgment. The rescue has to be more than just talk. They need a miracle to happen in their brain to be able to receive such an all too good to believe gift. This can be a paranoid bunch, a cynical bunch. And again, no judgment. So here's John Barclay talking about Paul and his understanding of the Christ gift, but it could easily refer to the Sermon on the Mount as well. Quote, Paul, we shall see, had an unusual, creative, and socially radical understanding of the grace of God arising from the gift, Christ. Whereas good gifts were and still are normally thought to be distributed best to fitting or worthy recipients, Paul took the Christ gift, the ultimate gift of God to the world, to be given without regard to worth, and in the absence of worth, an unconditioned or incongruous gift that did not match the worth of its recipients, but created it, close quote. So you see, something new has to be created in the brains and the lives of those people. Jesus came for the Tokoian spirit. He still does. This is Jesus' pattern, his passion, his ministry on earth, his DNA. Jesus' Beatitudes bless persons not because of the virtues, but because of their lacking, their inadequacies. Bruner adds, quote, Jesus put himself squarely on the side of the wretched of the earth, close quote. It was, per Thielicke, a, quote, host of the miserable, the guilt-burdened, the lonely, the incurably ill, the careworn, the people who are hagridden by anxiety. They gaze at Jesus with inscrutable eyes that can be fathomed only by the Savior himself. In some mysterious way, Jesus attracts the miserable. He draws the sinners and sufferers from their hiding places like a magnet. Undoubtably, the reason for this is that men sense this, figure something they did not see in any other man. The powers of guilt and suffering cannot touch him. That mysteriously, these powers retreat as he comes by, so they sought to get near him, close quote. Jesus does something shocking, so intimate, so unlikely, so moving for people like them. He draws near. He doesn't avoid. He comes close, in contrast to how they're treated by others. In his eyes, they see compassion, not elitism or criticism or racism or judgment, not better than thou, not looking down, well, you should have known better. And he rolls up his sleeves and touches them, speaks to them, blesses them, heals them. I am so sure that he smiles at them. No questions asked, no strings attached, none of the Beatitudes, no closing shots, no demands, just a gracious, unbelievable rescue. In a word, he honors them like they haven't been honored by any other person for a long, long time. No wonder they would listen to him, follow him, tell others about him. Their world, their very being is being changed, a little or a lot. That's what Jesus did then. That's what Jesus does now, maybe even right now. Yep. So to be clear, in this eternal drama, we, each of us, all of you listening, are the tokoi to pneumati. Though many of us will deny that. We don't want to believe that. It's too hard to hear, much less say. But from God's perspective, right, we're them. We all want to look into the eyes of others and see respect. We want to feel honored, appreciated, noticed. Yeah? And today, Jesus is pursuing the unworthy, ready to raise us up to honor and glory that we have subconsciously really, really, really wanted, but never really, really felt we deserved. I want to talk about honor and shame cultures. This is pertinent to the Sermon on the Mount. So how do these perennially unenviable tokoi to pneumati start to become the enviable? In cultural anthropology, there's a distinction made between guilt innocence and honor-shame cultures. We're going to look at that. Guilt-innocence cultures first. In a guilt-innocence culture, control is maintained by guilt and the expectation of punishment for falling short, right? Sin, either now or in the afterlife. So for certain condemned behaviors, the law. The guilt-innocence worldview focuses on justice, law, punishment, right and wrong. Usually the emphasis is on the individual's conscience, knowing right and wrong, individual choice and blame. People prioritize obedience to the law or getting rid of your guilt by repentance, justice, apology, etc. So righteousness, the phrase, is understood as doing the right thing, keeping the law behaviorally, right? Doing right. Guilt-innocence cultures are often individualistic. We inform our conscience so that we can make the right choices. There's individual accountability, there's responsibility, there's agency. Sounds a lot like the United States, right? Guilt-innocence cultures tend to read the Sermon on the Mount as principles that inform right behavior. The righteous path. What does the law really say about adultery, murder, prayer, piety, and so forth? How can I change my behavior to earn God's favor? Look, we in the United States, in the West, are a guilt-innocence culture. Though some people are suggesting that's changing, not much. Let's look at honor-shame culture. In an honor-shame culture, like Rome in the Middle East of the biblical times, people are controlled through the threat of being shamed, losing face, being ostracized by family, tribe, community, fear of messing up and the people seeing you as you really are behind the many masks that you have to wear. Think of China today. Did you know that there are 113 shame-related terms and idioms in Chinese? 113. So shame. It's not like you did wrong. You find out that you are wrong, unclean, impure, unworthy, ugly, an embarrassment to yourself, your family, tribe, people, and God. So people in this culture avoid being seen doing shameful stuff or being in situations where someone might shame you. So many people will think, if they knew my dark secrets, my uglies, they wouldn't want to have anything to do with me. And that's the voice of shame. Honor-shame cultures are typically collectivist, not individualist. In individualist cultures like the United States and Canada, independence and equality are fostered. While in collectivist cultures, conformity, interdependence, group solidarity, and hierarchical authority are encouraged. And note, it's not just that you're ashamed when you do or do not do something. You can also feel such shame when someone shames you wrongly. So think of being bullied or raped or robbed or unwanted sexting or devalued by the rumor or gossip or lies, where you are shamed, against your will, not your fault. Uncontrolled social media is terrifying in shame cultures. Righteousness, unlike guilt-innocence cultures, is understood as being worthy of honor, name, and worth in your tribe. Being right, being seen as a right person. It is collectivistic, so your identity and value is a function of the group. And they read Sermon on the Mount to find a path back to, listen, to restored position of favor with God, family, and tribe. So how can I experience the favor of God? How can I inherit eternal life? Gain face with God. Jesus and Paul were from an honor-shame culture, and we're speaking into it. We in the West are primarily a guilt-innocence culture. Here's Michael Gorman, quote, "In honor-shame context, self-esteem would be conceived as a ridiculous oxymoron. The only esteem one has is not bestowed by the self, but by the group," close quote. I think this is one of the reasons that we've misunderstood so much of the Sermon on the Mount. On that hillside was a congregation of the shamed. They weren't looking for what to do better at. They needed their shame removed and to be restored to community again. The good news of Jesus was that now there was a way where such shamed people could regain face. Yeah? Let me tell you how. I want to introduce a new concept to you, patronage. We Westerners have to work hard to get it. In an honor-shame culture, you don't have the possibility of working harder to change your status. You're stuck. In a sense, it's not up to you, but up to your tribe, your family, your people. The only thing that you can legitimately do is to accept your new status of dishonor with honor. Unless your lot changes, largely outside of your power, you're stuck. You're shamed forever. Unless, in an honor-shame culture, the way this happens is through patronage. A patron is a person of substance and position in the tribe, and they can marry, adopt, embrace, rescue, or honor their social inferiors. That's what patrons do. And when it happens, a new relationship is formed where the inferior, the client, finds new respect and name because of their patron's actions on their behalf. The inferior, their face gets restored. And in that new relationship, they're raised to honor that they don't deserve. The benefactor patron's motive is grace, generosity, kindness, mercy, benevolence, compassion, which they freely give to their new unworthy client. And being a patron is a high honor among the people. Generosity is not an act of charity here. It's an expression of the character of the patron. The clients respond, or they should, with loyalty, gratefulness, faithfulness, and reflect the nature of their patron in their own lives and how they treat others. They live lives that honor the benefactor's name. My head goes to the parables, right? The Good Samaritan, or the prodigal son, or the royal banquet. All of those reflect a patronage system that the people then would have understood. We struggle with it. So here's a stunning picture. Here's the real headline. On the hillside, Jesus was acting as if, saying the right words, volunteering to be the patron for the crowd. He became their patron benefactor, their husband, if you will, their guardian, their discipler. These formerly isolated, shamed nobodies who nobody wanted now had a champion committed to their well-being. I experienced that. This is how we're going to read the Sermon on the Mount. Now, we modern evangelicals want to overlay our understanding of salvation and conversion here, and no doubt that was partly in play to one degree or another, but what most likely the crowd understood was that they had a patron for the first time who wanted to restore them to dignity and name, and actually had the power and the social authority to do that. I'm not saying that these people were saved. All of them, as we think of it today, heaven-born, perhaps. I'm suggesting that something else happened that could include that. These dishonored, shamed people who had little chance of restoration and honor became clients of a new patron, and therefore people of worth and honor. This is how they would have experienced it from their cultural lens. They had a patron now who offered them a new life. And no wonder they followed him then. This crowd akolutheoed him. It's amazing. Something radical happened. Something special happened on that hillside. It was a social relational transformation, unwritten covenant that somehow changed this group of very diverse, unwanted people, nobodies, because there was somebody there for them. They entered a father embrace. And I suspect they would have struggled to believe it. I still do. But the miraculous, unheard of before process had begun because Jesus said so. He came to set enslaved people free and raise them to glory. By the way, still today. This is the essence of what at least began to happen, a little or a lot, when the people get saved. So there's overlap. We miss so much when we think of the Sermon on the Mount as a bunch of TED's talks that promotes a better life, that is, if you take advantage of it. That's just guilt innocence thinking. This was an honor-shame culture. They wouldn't have processed it that way. I can only imagine that these hurting people with Jesus, I imagine with Jesus, face to face, seeing his eyes, his expression, his smile. And many of them were powerfully changed. A miracle happened. They went from feeling dishonored to feeling honored. Why? Because they came face to face with Jesus. Still today. I don't think that it's conceivable that they left thinking, well, now I got a list of, now I know why God did this to me. No. But that is how we usually teach it or imply anyway. Here's Bruner. Quote, I think something actually happens to listening people when Jesus' Beatitudes are passed on to them. The Beatitudes are concentrated gospel. I love that. The person for whom the experience of impoverishment is a spiritual crisis, who groans in his or her spirit under the poverty, who is on the way down, and who cries out, to this person Jesus announces, look up, I'm here, taking your part, and the kingdom I bring is especially for you, close quote. this is our hope today, that we've been touched the same way. I need that touch every day. Yeah? Here's 3 engaged questions that I think might help us understand this better. So enjoy. Engage number 1. What did you learn today that you didn't know before? Do you agree or disagree? Push back. Engage number 2. Read the following passage, Luke 4:16-21, aloud in the group. It is Jesus' first sermon in his hometown of Nazareth, not too long before the Sermon on the Mount. It summarizes his vision. Thoughts? Seeing a theme in Jesus' ministry, his DNA? And then engage number 3. Check out this provocative quote from John Barclay. He's speaking about Paul, but could easily apply to the Sermon on the Mount. And push back. Quote, in the ancient world, almost every aspect of worth was dependent on one's public reputation, which was insecure and perpetually contestable at almost every point. To maintain your worth, you had to keep asserting it and defending it, in the awareness that others could at any moment make a claim by which your worth would be undermined or outclassed. The rumor mill was the Romans' social media, and they were ever anxious to make it clear that by one criterion or another, wealth, ancestry, education, legal status, physique, ethnicity, or character, their honor could be established in comparison with others. As Cicero puts it, by nature we yearn and hunger for honor, and once we have glimpsed, as it were, some part of its radiance, there is nothing we are not prepared to bear and to suffer in order to secure it. Paul's antidote to this social poison has 2 ingredients. On the one hand, those who have been reconstructed by the Christ event are no longer invested in the forms of capital in which most people find their worth. Boy, this is so good. Since ethnicity, status, and gender are no longer criteria of superior worth, and since God pays no regard to the face, but distributes his grace without regard to worth, the normal grounds for competition have lost their significance. The believer's true and only worth is constituted by his or her identity in Christ, a gift received, not a status inherited or achieved. Close quote. Wow. Well, in the next talk, we're going to unpack the rest of the first Beatitude. We have a pretty good idea who Jesus' audience was then and, right now. So what does he give them? And how are they changed? Those are the 2 questions. Remember, the core of the gospel is that because of all that Jesus has done on your behalf and mine, God, humanly speaking, has to love us. And he does. As we are, not as we should be or could be. We'll see you next time. Take heart, child of God.